This conference will now be recorded.
And Brevin, if in case you missed it, I do have the Colo SP agreement and the OCP Ready certification mark agreements ready to go. So they're complete, and we'll be uploading them to the Colo SP website on the OCP page.
Good. Has that been updated?
I don't know whether it's been updated yet. I sent it to our website developers. I sent it to Steve. I think they're just going to redesign the Colo SP page and get it done.
Good.
I think we need the site assessment along with it too, right?
We want to go ahead and publish it all at the same time.
Yeah, otherwise people will be having the Colo SP agreement and the OCP ready, but they won't know what to do with it.
Yep.
So it'd be nice if we could get it all done at the same time so that when we put the directions in, it all kind of makes sense.
Very good. Okay, I'll go ahead and if you can make me the presenter, share my screen. Archana, if you want to go through any updates that the foundation has regarding those upcoming workshops and such.
Oh, yeah, we have 3 workshops that are going to be happening here in the next couple of weeks. Actually 2, I take that back. There's going to be the telco workshop that's happening, and that's on October 29th in Dallas, Texas. It is day 0 of the DCD Cloud and Colo event. It's at the AT&T headquarters. It's a full day workshop, so that's one. The second one we have is the High Performance Computing Workshop, which is also November 15th. It's on the first day of the supercomputing event in Dallas, Texas, and it's being hosted by IBM at the Omni Hotel in Dallas. And then, oh yeah, I am missing one. The storage, the archival storage subgroup is having a workshop as well, and they're doing it on October 29th at the Western Digital facility here in San Jose. And that's a half-a-day workshop, and all of those events are in the upcoming events portion of the OCP website. So if you do need more details on how to register and the detailed agenda, please go there. So that's what I got.
Very good.
Thanks, Brevin.
And I'll be attending the telco workshop up there in Dallas, and then also the Colo Plus Cloud. So
okay,
cool.
I'll see you there.
Exactly. Be interested in seeing you and meeting up with any OCP interested parties.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to cover the site assessment and the checklist from the foundation. So what the OCP Foundation has developed to mimic the other checklists that are associated with different projects, specifications and such. We have one that is dedicated to the OCP Ready. So each Colo solution provider would fill out one of these for the entity, for the Colo solution provider. We select whether or not they meet all of the requirements. And we have the membership. We have the Colo solution provider agreement, which
Hey, Brevin,
mentioned. Yes.
Are you sharing anything?
It was supposed to be.
Okay.
How about now?
Sounded like you were talking to something visually, so good, much better.
Right. So we have we have Colo solution provider. They have they're a member of OCP. They have the Colo solution provider agreement, which Archana mentioned. Copyright license, as well as certification mark agreement, and the landing page. And all of these have to be completed and in order to be fully in the program. Now moving on to individual sites that a colo solution provider wants to designate as OCP ready, they need to go through the site assessment associated with each of those sites. So at some point, they will have completed what you will be familiar with, which is the scorecard that we developed for each one of their sites.
Nice.
So two things that I wanted to cover here is in the facility assessment portion of the high-level data center information here, what are the parameters that we want to make sure that each data center or colo solution provider provides. Right now we have type of facility.
And what's that mean?
I don't know.
We can have drop downs, Brevin, for this, so we can get like consistency of.
Yeah, that one's a weird one. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, well,
We're
what
talking
different
retail?
options, yeah, what different options of facilities are you talking about for colos?
This was put in here by Bill. So I'm not sure what his thought was there. We might have just mentioned generally type of facility, not necessarily referencing individual, sort of types. So I guess that's a question on what does type of facility mean. If we were to do a drop down, what would that drop down be?
Retail, wholesale? Well, maybe that's what he's thinking from a colo perspective. What would a tenant need to know?
Okay.
You think
And there might be a mix too, right? Somebody.
Both can be an option.
Yeah.
Both either.
You know,
Both either can be an option. We can actually put that in there.
I don't think he's talking about construction. I wouldn't have thought.
I don't think so.
could it be a rental or own facility? Do you need to have some kind of I mean, this is just speculations, of course,
Leased
but I mean,
or owned.
or you're owning the facility by yourself, or you're renting, so you need to involve the landlord or something to, I don't know.
Do you think that this is going? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just texted with Bill and I asked him to join. Just because some of these fields, if he added, it would be good to hear his perspective on it. And if there he is, he just joined. So
Excellent.
I think that it would be good to get his perspective, because then since he's been the one altering the spreadsheet, maybe he can just delete it, or you can delete it if it doesn't make sense. Hey, Bill, are you on?
Yes.
So if you can see Brevin's screen, we are just going through the Colo Ready facility assessment.
Yes.
And there was a question on the row 4, which is the type of facility. It was a field that apparently was added, and we were trying to get an idea of what that meant, and maybe you could help us understand what you meant. If there's a drop-down menu of a selection that we need to give them, a multiple choice.
Oh,
or
that request came from the team. So someone said to put in the type of facility.
Okay, then we'll define that.
Or we could get rid of it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if it's causing so much confusion amongst all of us, can you imagine somebody that's not new to this?
Just get rid of it. It came from not the last call, but the call before. On
Yeah.
the checklist, somebody said we should record the type of facility. So as we were talking, I just added that in.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I assumed happened. And so what we're trying to find here at a high level is what are the parameters when you first look at a site or a campus that you sort of use to describe them. One of them is power. One of them is white space. And so we have the area of the white space that's covered. And we have the general site description, which includes power, network capacity, features. Would we want to separate these into one is power available at the site or campus, one is network capacity, one is features and services, and allow it to be a free form field that the provider can fill out as they see fit?
Yeah, I think you could
but
have maybe like carrier neutral might be one of those, but again, it's whether it's pertaining to being OCP.
yeah,
That's something
yeah,
that we need to describe in an OCP assessment.
I think that this is beyond OCP. This is more on the commercial side.
yeah.
So
Just
from
yeah. How would somebody describe their facility? I have a carrier neutral, 5 megawatt, facility with 2 in power and fresh air, free cooling, something like that, right? How would somebody describe it? I am partial. So I think in addition to area of the white space, in order to describe the site, I am partial to IT load power also.
critical power.
Yeah, critical power. It's easier for me if somebody says I got a 10 megawatt data center. I can visualize that. Square meters or feet, I'm slower on personally.
Is that yeah, and is that critical total power or critical power?
I personally like what's available for the IT load,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
Yeah.
right,
site. Yeah.
right. So I think, are you thinking that maybe you put like an example description in there that says 5 megawatt air cooled, uptime institute level 3 resiliency, 4 kilowatt minimum, something like that.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
yeah, like in a comment or something so people know what to
yeah,
put. Yeah.
yeah, just with, like, put an example in there. I just threw out the minimum because I think you also want to, people are not going to sign up for 5 megawatts right off the bat, but they have understanding what the minimum load input is good. In other words, can I put a half a rack in there and be billed for it?
Okay. So how far do we want to get into this?
It can be a very long list.
Yeah. I mean, we're
Yeah.
getting into a whole other. You're developing their sort of like RFP questions and site assessments and getting into the commercial side
Yeah.
beyond what we're trying to solve here. And we're not trying to take over the procurement process or define
So,
those things.
right. So, by the way, most people have a web portal that describes this in detail.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we want to replicate that.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, you could link to site description or something. That's good.
I mean, you could, we can just put a URL in there, and I think 9 out of 10 times it's going to point to they already have an existing page somewhere.
maybe it's. I know that part of the being a solution provider, they need to provide a landing page, don't they, Bill? As part of the process.
Yes.
So if we
Yeah.
can, maybe we can say, well, the landing page should include this, and this information. So we take it out of here, but we ask the colo to put that in a certain format on their landing page. Then that may be the answer.
Okay, from this list here, do we see anything that needs to be added, subtracted, or clarified?
So it's whether is this a requirement to fill this out, because some may not want to divulge, say line 4, they may not want to divulge that information. And it's whether this information is then going to get published on a public portal.
Yeah, it will get published. Unfortunately, part of the issue is that we are going to have at least the site assessment published, not so much the checklist, but the site assessment, because you want to show people that, what about their facility makes them OCP ready, right? So.
Yeah, because they may not have any OCP racks. Certainly none of the, well, other than Switch, they're the only ones that I'm out of the ones in the pipeline. They're the only ones that got OCP racks. Well, other than obviously, yeah.
Data
Potentially
4
rack
down
space
in
as well.
Paris. Data 4 in Paris has racks.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, no, I stand corrected. Yeah, Data 4 have. Yeah.
So we're really talking about, and we had this discussion before, whether having OCP racks versus not having OCP racks, whether that should push you out of the process, or whether building your data center in order to support Open Compute racks is just as important as having them. And you have to sort of chicken or the egg. What comes first, building the data center or getting the racks? And at some point, a data center can support OCP racks without having any in it day one. So I think that although I understand the need for it or the desire for it, I don't think that it's part of this high level sort of assessment.
No, I don't
So
think.
that may
Think
be
that should be in there.
that may be a category that you want to move to the checklist.
Like
In other
down
words,
in
is it
the considerations.
well? I'm sorry, to the checklist portion, which isn't exposed to the public. In other words, is it useful information for this group or the IC or somebody to make a decision on to whether or not to certify? So if that's useful information, then we can put that in the checklist portion, not the self-assessment.
So putting it in the checklist portion, does it make a difference?
No, it doesn't. It won't. We won't be allowed to make a subjective determination of whether it is supported or not because it has OCP racks or not. So it's irrelevant to the OCP Colo Solution Provider certification whether it has OCP racks installed or not.
So one option is that you can put it at the very bottom and like an optional. So if they want to fill it, they can, and if they don't want to, they don't have to. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not a requirement.
I mean,
Maybe
if it was
that's.
sorry, Archie.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, if it was a retail colo, then they may want to highlight that they have OCP racks ready and empty, ready for a tenant to put their gear into. So it's good information, but not. I don't. I don't believe it should be a must-have, but it should be maybe put there for information only.
Okay, then I would move it down here. We have 3 different sections. We have service, we have efficiency, and we have openness. We put it under openness.
Was it part of the service? I think it's. Would it not be part of the service that they can provide a rack?
I don't think that's not what we're referencing. We're not referencing whether they can provide a rack. We're providing whether there are OCP racks installed.
Mm.
Not that somebody can bring in a server and deploy it into a rack, but that
I think you take it out. I think you just take it out completely. I wouldn't put it down below.
I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree.
If somebody wants to get part of the sales process and say, hey, we have OCP racks installed here, we can prove it, or we can verify that that's part of it, but I think it's irrelevant to this step. We're going to delete that.
Okay.
For the site description network capacity, should we do this free form and they can say whatever each they say, whether it is carrier neutral, that they have 16 carriers on site, and I would almost say that instead of calling it network capacity, I would almost call it network availability, or connectivity provider availability.
Yeah, I think so. And they can put in their number of carriers, number of network connections, and all sorts of
As far as features and services, do we see anything? Is there anything that we would actually see somebody using this for and using it for consistently? Would this be something like facility features? Would this be something such as other services available?
Like maintenance contractors or what?
Facility features may be a free form where you can highlight, example, rainwater harvesting, or highlighting parking spaces available, on-site storage available, or you can mention that it is a indirect adiabatic cooling system. Anything that's not necessarily covered elsewhere, but is a highlight to differentiate that particular facility. As far as other services, I would see that being whether or not there is a network bandwidth available, whether or not smart hands or remote hand services were available, any sort of other services that were provided. And the question there is can we, if we provide it there, is there a way to get some consistency from all of the providers while not making it a 3 or 4 paragraph sales speech.
Yeah, it could turn into that, couldn't it? Unless you restrict the size of the cell.
Now, we could do that. We could also, I could take it upon myself that, or you, Mark, as we bring in these individual providers, we are able to direct them into something that is short, concise, and consistent across the board. And we take that on as part of their onboarding.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, this has got to be described somehow. Yeah, I'm trying to put in a note section here. Certainly at the moment, yeah. Yeah, it as part of the onboarding, it would have to be, yeah, they'll need some hand holding to for them to understand what this means. So we just need to agree ourselves and then agree the format, and then yeah, that could be described in an email. This is the sort of thing that we would need you to provide, you know, if you have that information. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth having. I mean, things like accreditations could be put in that facility features. You know, as you say, if you've got Uptime Institute, you know, design and build, you know, or design and construction, or design or only, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say put it in, and we'll see how people react in the first ones, and if we need to, you know, get more specific, we can do that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this seem like a good list?
Yeah, I think
Anything to add or subtract? I think that we have a good. Is there any other piece that we would add to this?
I mean, things like security you could put into facility features, couldn't you?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll start taking notes on that so that we can build out that guidance.
So I do have a question here. So I know that we will do a checklist once for the member, right? And the member will fill out all the information. But I do believe that for the site assessment, there could be multiple sites that someone is trying to, you know, do for OCP ready, right? And
Yes.
so my question here is that along with the site assessment status and all of that, don't we need a specific address for each site assessment?
Hmm. Do we have
And
location name? Do we need to go make sure that we have the address?
yeah, because I mean, I know the member will have a corporate address in the checklist, but in the site assessment, you absolutely at the very top need to have the address that they're doing the assessment for. And that needs to be here, I believe, in this checklist or in this tab.
Like
Yeah, I was thinking that in that name or data center location name that it would be descriptive enough to know, you know, which site, what address, and what building, and even what data hall. I mean,
Yes.
even within a building, you know, you're going to have potentially, you know, 4 or more data halls, and you know, each of those would be configured differently.
they may
So
be.
yeah, so it's possible you could have, you know, one room or one data hall that is actually meets the checklist and the others don't. But you know, most people, the way that their naming conventions for their data centers actually describes it by site, or you know, address, location, building, you know, data.
Is that the case universally, globally too? Or is it just a nomenclature that we use in the United States? The reason I'm asking is that I don't know if that's the same case in Europe. I do know that like when we were driving around, you know, Amsterdam last time, there were, or even Paris last time, there were a lot of Equinix, say, data centers all over the place, right? And in the same city, in the same area. So I was just thinking that, you know, if they do a site assessment they'll do it per site, and we will have multiple tabs here, right? Site assessment number 1 for one, maybe data hall or one location, and then site assessment number 2. So I kind of wanted it very distinct here, that they'd be putting down a very different address here, and then
Well, let's
tab
just
2.
we'll look at it from an example standpoint. So let's say we have a data center in Seattle, and it's called Seattle 10. Good. An OCP user could take SCA 10, go to the website or go to any other sort of data center tracking thing, look up SCA 10 and find out that it is located at this address. But I don't think that I think it'd be just as good for you have SCA 10 and then you have it at 1 Main Street. I think that's just as well to be able to see that.
Okay. I kind of like that. It's a little bit more specific, and the OCP ready mark will go to 1 Main Street at SEA 10. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now, if there's SEA 12, 14, 16, and they kind of have the 4 Main Street, 10 Main Street, whatever their address is, then I think that would be better, because again, we're issuing a mark for either a facility, or I'm assuming a portion of a facility, the way that Bill was just describing, if it's a data hall in a given facility. So we just have to be careful how we do that, and I'm okay with the way that you're describing it, Brevin, so long as it's something that's universal. Because we are going to have data centers from all over the world potentially applying for this, right?
Yes. And I
Do we
think
need
that we
to be-
can.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we need to be specific about the OCP ready white space area? If there is only one portion of the site that has OCP ready white space.
Right. So here's my thought. I was just thinking about this. So we could be very specific and say, no, it's it's 4th floor, room 10, right? Or we could just point to the facility, and that would steer the customer, steer the community member to that facility provider, that colo provider. And after that, they're going to assess what they need and where they put them. And I actually think that's sufficient. I don't want to get down to a specific floor or location. I mean, as long as they have a OCP ready hall somewhere at that site, I'm okay with that. And let the customer and let the provider and the consumer figure out where they want to go at that point.
So we're saying that it can take a minimum of 1 rack, and then it's up to the the prospective tenant to work out the space that they need. But we've at least said that they can get 1 rack in. I mean, we don't have to say that, but it's whether there's got to be a minimum, isn't there? Minimum area.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is looking good. This is looking more consistent and clear about what we provide from a high level. I think it covers the 2 basics that we saw in our references. Was how big is the facility? Well, where it's located? How much white space area is in the facility? How much critical IT power is in the facility? Network providers. We always mentioned it's good to be able to connect to the outside world. I think a little bit more free form is the facility features, anything additional to be highlighted, and then other services available. As we start to then transition this into marketplace listings, I think Bill will want to look at how we maybe highlight those for each individual one of these sites to bring these top level space, power, features, services into that marketplace listing. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Now I want to spend the last bit having the open discussion regarding some of the weight ratings discussions that we've been having. So one of the issues that we saw with one provider was their loading dock area had a point load or concentrated load that did not meet the minimum standards that were put forward in the checklist. Upon the investigation by Mark on where that came from, it was highlighted that it came from the BICSI 002 revision. And so at that point, should we stay consistent with that BICSI 002 recommendation, or should we, and it's not even a recommendation, it's the minimum on the BICSI 002. Do you think it's good for us to stay consistent with that, or should we look to go below that minimum to allow OCP?
Yeah. This is and the site in question will be yeah. I mean, Gerard has said that whether from his notes, it looks like it was his rating is based on that 1 inch square load. So I know Gerard hasn't been able to respond to my question today whether it does meet based on the how BICSI have worked out the performance specification. But if it's below, then that means that could be a difficulty because it's an exception at the moment.
Yeah. So from my perspective, or my opinion, is that those numbers were not made up by the community. They are from a highly respected guide for building out data center space. And that's been reviewed by not only the community but the entire industry. And so I don't feel like we should allow or go anywhere underneath that minimum as provided.
I can't see why they wouldn't be able to strengthen the floor to meet that with some investment.
Yep.
Yeah, it must be possible to be able to provide that specification. I mean, Roberto, what the specification in the modular data center, that has that been achieved? Is that easily achieved from your perspective?
Yeah. It's easily achieved, and I think if it's a best practice from the industry, it's easy to have that as a reference point, and it should be good because they have involved. I mean, not only for facility reasons, but also for people security reasons and everything like that. I mean, do we have a well-known best practice that works? I think why not stay with that and not accept anything below? It's easy to achieve. It's not hard. I mean, this is construction-wise easy, I will say.
Yeah. So
I mean, if you have to do a reinforcement regarding that, maybe you are not in the right facility, I will say.
Good, very good point.
Now, what I have added and what I think we should be able to do is reference where we got that information within the guidelines. if it is something that we have calculated ourselves, such as, which the next topic is, weight loading within a lift or elevator, if we're able to sort of put this note in this assessment, well, 2 open rack V2s with 500 kilogram base load, we can get 3 of them into this unit. So that is a very straightforward explanation of where we came up with this number. And so we might want to, and actually that's what I've been doing, is going back and inserting some of these references so that we can, a provider who is going through the guidelines and then hoping to go through the site assessment, they can then do their own research and understand why they meet or don't meet the minimum standards.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good idea. Yeah. Very good.
Okay, so going back to the additional question, which was raised for another provider, we're looking at, Mark, what was the rating of that particular lift?
1,000 kilograms.
1,000 kilograms. Okay. So a 500 kilogram base load, I think that's a minimum viable, and a 1,400 kilogram heavy load, even if we assessed that a fully loaded open rack V2 at 1,400 kilogram, if we reduced it to only one rack being able to go up the lift at one time, which is acceptable, takes a little bit longer to deploy, but you still get it from the ground floor to the second floor. That would need to be at 1,500 kilogram in order to support that. Are we going to be open and available, or even give the option for a data center to say that they have a 500 kilogram lift or 1,000 kilogram lift that then would require a solution integrator or the customer themselves to remove servers or to deploy their servers separately from the base rack in a data center?
So
I
the
think
concern I have with this particular requirement is that you could have a facility that was designed for, let's say 8 kilowatts power density, and in that facility, or that facility, it's very unlikely that you're going to actually pre-build a rack that's 1,400 kilograms, just because of the rack density. The configuration is always going to be a less than full rack, even though you're deploying a rack level solution. So I struggle with this as a standalone requirement that isn't necessarily tied back to power density, for example.
So if we're talking about a minimum open rack V2 at 500 kilograms, base load, whatever that is, ended up being 3 kilowatts, 6 kilowatts.
Well, we've always said 500 kilograms and 6.6 kilowatts.
Okay.
That's what the guidance document was based around.
Yeah.
And we just took a snapshot. We just discussed it with a number of integrators, and they said, well, that would be the minimum. But probably they would more likely provide a lot of 800 kilogram and maybe 12. It's going to be a mixture.
So isn't acceptable that is it acceptable that you can support the minimum? and then it's optimal that you can support the maximum.
I mean, I mean, yeah, I do kind of like the 500 and 1500. I mean, 1500 is a pretty darn reasonable rack. But
I'm unsure if you could actually build a rack that was 3,000 kilograms,
No, I'm thinking.
like a
I
solid
think
steel
with
block.
yeah, that's
think-
so extreme. It really is.
I think we're thinking of sort of deployment times. Being able to move within the facility multiple racks. So I think it's more about speeding up the implementation than anything else.
But
So
that's not a
1500
restricted. That's
yeah.
not a restriction on the ability to deploy one OCP rack.
No.
Now, if I'm talking about updating this and bringing in those notes, I would state something in terms of acceptable 500 kilogram. OpenRack v2 has a standard 500 kilogram base, and this could support one OpenRack v2. Good. Then the notes for the optimum would be OpenRack v2 supports standard 500 kilogram. This lift can support up to 3 at a time. Or at 1500 kilogram, it can support one of the maximum 1400 kilogram cabin.
I think you see one of the other things. One of the data centers in question. I've seen a publicity piece on their data center, and it actually talks about the number of optimums, percentage of optimums, or numbers of optimums against acceptables. So I think it's going to be used by people within their sales literature. When they're comparing their facility against others.
So I think what we're really looking at is terming as is acceptable the minimum and is optimum being able to support the maximum. I think when we look at the whole thing, defining how do we come up with these, what does acceptable mean and what does optimum mean, we have to be clear on that.
Yeah.
So, I don't have any, particular subject matter expertise when it comes to weights, but 3,000 kilograms just doesn't pass the face test for me. That's the weight of my, 3/4 ton Suburban, which last I checked doesn't fit in an elevator.
Yeah. I mean,
unless it gets
yeah,
crushed.
I'm with you. There's going to be an extreme situation where you have some strange, crazy heavy rack and not a high performance computing or something. But I don't think that should be max.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with. I think 500 seems like a reasonable number, and to me, kind of passes the face test. I mean, even at 500 kilograms, you're talking about a 1,200 pound rack. That's pretty darn difficult to maneuver, right? I mean, going down a loading ramp, that would crush you alone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay. I think that we've come to a better point.
Yeah. Great.
But I think we also then need to take that same mentality in review of everything else.
Hey, Archana, do we have our 8:30 call?
We do. I was just writing a note to the team saying that I've got to take off here in a few seconds, but the checklist,
Okay.
the checklist and the site assessment looks awesome now.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
all
we're
coming.
very close. I think we're very, very close, if not already there.
It is
Yeah,
all coming.
I have to drop for another call too, folks. Sorry.
All right.
Good.
Okay.
You can go ahead and stop the recording here at 30 minutes. Mark, Rob, anybody, if you want